The command prompt was blinking green against the black screen, a steady, rhythmic pulse that felt less like a computer process and more like a heartbeat. And as I stared at the line of code that had just executed the termination sequence, I realized the killer wasn't in the room with us. He wasn't even in the state, but he was watching me die through the webcam lens, pixel by pixel. Before we rewind the tape to see how a simple welfare check turned into the most complex homicide investigation of my career, do me a favor, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because once you enter this digital labyrinth, you're going to want to know how to get back out. It started on a Tuesday, under the relentless weeping gray sky that defines Seattle in November. The rain wasn't just falling, it was driving sideways, hammering against the windshield of my unmarked Crown Vic like gravel. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, leaving a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth that perfectly matched the mood of the dispatch call. Detective work in the Pacific Northwest usually involves domestic disputes gone wrong or drug deals that went south, gritty, tangible violence. But the call to the dispatch center regarding 4400 Skyline Drive was different. It was a silent alarm, triggered not by a break-in, but by a biomonitor. The victim was Elias Thorne. If you follow the tech world, you know the name. Thorne was a wonderkind, a cybersecurity architect who built the Citadel, a proprietary firewall used by half the Fortune 500 companies in the United States. He was worth $3 billion and valued his privacy more than his life. His home wasn't just a house, it was a fortress of glass and steel perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound, fully automated, fully integrated, and completely severed from the physical grid. When I pulled up to the gate, the iron bars were already retracted. That was the first red flag. Thorne's security protocols were legendary. The gate shouldn't have opened unless I had a retinal scan on file. I waited for my partner, Detective Sarah Miller, to pull up behind me. She was younger, sharper on the tech side, the kind of cop who could strip a hard drive faster than a pistol. She stepped out of her car, pulling her collar up against the rain. "Gates open," she shouted over the wind. "System failure?" "Or an invitation," I muttered, resting my hand on my service weapon out of habit. We approached the front door. It was a massive slab of obsidian-colored metal. Before I could even knock, the smart lock hummed, the bolts retracted with a heavy mechanical clunk, and the door swung inward. The hallway beyond was bathed in soft, amber LED lighting. The air inside was scrubbed clean, smelling of ozone and expensive minimalism. "Mr. Thorne," I announced, my voice echoing off the polished concrete walls. Silence. Not the silence of an empty house, but the heavy, pressurized silence of a tomb. We cleared the ground floor, room by room. The kitchen was pristine, a half-eaten apple turning brown on the granite island, the only sign of life. The living room offered a panoramic view of the stormy sound, the rain lashing against floor-to-ceiling impact glass. But the house felt wrong. The temperature was dropping rapidly. I could see my breath misting in the air. The thermostat on the wall read 52 degrees and falling. "Basement," Miller said, pointing to a stairwell that looked more like the entrance to a bank vault. "His server room is down there. That's where he spends 90% of his time." As we descended, the hum grew louder, the sound of massive cooling fans spinning at maximum RPM. At the bottom of the stairs, we found the glass wall. The server room was sealed behind 2 inches of ballistic polycarbonate. And there was Elias Thorne. He was sitting in his ergonomic chair, slumped forward onto his desk. His face was pressed against a mechanical keyboard, but it was the color of his skin that stopped me cold. He wasn't pale, he was a deep, violently dark shade of blue-purple. His hands were clawed at his throat, fingernails torn, leaving jagged scratches on his own neck. "Jesus," Miller whispered. "He choked?" I tried the door handle. Locked. "Police," I yelled, banging on the glass. Thorne didn't move. I looked at the control panel next to the door. It was a touchscreen interface. It was flashing a bright red warning. Atmospheric displacement active. Oxygen levels 2%. Argon concentration 98%. It's a fire suppression system, Miller realized, her eyes wide. Server farms use inert gas like argon or nitrogen to put out fires without damaging the electronics. It sucks the oxygen out of the room instantly. There's no fire, I said, looking through the glass. The servers were humming along, lights blinking green. There was no smoke, no flame. The system hadn't malfunctioned. It had been weaponized. Thorn had been trapped in a glass box, and the air had been stolen from his lungs by his own house. We called it in. The CSI team arrived within the hour, along with the fire department to override the suppression system and vent the gas. It took them 40 minutes to make the air breathable enough to enter. By the time the medical examiner, Dr. Eris Thorn, no relation, stepped in, the body was cold. Asphyxiation, Eris said, adjusting his glasses. Textbook. When the argon hit, he would have felt dizzy within seconds. Unconsciousness in maybe 30. Death shortly after. He knew what was happening. He tried to claw his way out. I looked around the room. It was a tech geek's paradise turned into a gas chamber. 3 massive monitors were still active. The center screen displayed a single command line window. User, admin. Command, initiate Protocol 99. Status, complete. Protocol 99, I said to Miller. Find out what that is. I can't, she said, tapping on the keyboard of the main terminal. She was wearing gloves, careful not to disturb Prince, though we both knew there wouldn't be any. The system is locked down, biometric encryption. But look at the timestamp on the command. I leaned in. The command was executed at 11:42 a.m. The ME puts time of death between 11:40 and 12, I noted. So someone typed this in while Thorn was sitting right here? Or, Miller said, looking up at the camera lens mounted in the corner of the ceiling, its red eye glowing softly, someone remote accessed the system. That was the moment the case went from a suspicious death to a cyber murder. The next 48 hours were a blur of caffeine and frustration. We secured a warrant for Thorn's digital life, which was significantly larger than his physical one. Because of the high-profile nature of the victim and the complexity of the crime, the FBI stuck their nose in. Special Agent Vance arrived on Thursday morning. He was typical bureau, sharp suit, sharper haircut, and an attitude that suggested the local PD was little more than mall security. We're taking the servers, Vance said, standing in the middle of our precinct bullpen. This is potentially a national security issue. Thorn's code protects critical infrastructure. It's a homicide investigation in my jurisdiction, I shot back, leaning against my desk. The body is ours, the crime scene is ours. You can have a mirror image of the drives, but the hardware stays here until my forensics team is done. We compromised. Vance got his data, but he had to work out of our precinct. We set up a war room in the conference center. The suspect list was short, which is usually a bad sign. It means you have to dig deep. Suspect number 1, Julian Vane, Thorn's former business partner. They had a falling out 3 years ago over the direction of the company. Vane wanted to sell user data, Thorn wanted total privacy. Vane was sued by Thorn last year for intellectual property theft. Vane lost everything. We brought Vane in. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a decade. Pale, jittery, wearing a hoodie that cost more than my car. We sat him down in interrogation room B. I didn't bother with the good cop routine. You know your rights, Mr. Vane, I said, sliding the Miranda waiver across the metal table. Sign it and tell me where you were Tuesday morning at 11:42 a.m. Vane laughed, a nervous, tick-filled sound. I was in court, detective, fighting another one of Elias's frivolous lawsuits. You can check the transcripts. We will, Miller said from the corner. But you're a coder, Julian. You don't need to be in the room to pull the trigger. You just need a script. Vane leaned forward. Look, I hated Elias. I'm glad he's dead. He was a sanctimonious prick who pretended to be the savior of the internet while hoarding patents. But I didn't kill him, and if I were going to kill him, I wouldn't use the fire suppression system.
That's sloppy. Sloppy? I asked. It left no physical evidence. It's sloppy because the Citadel, Elias's home system, logs everything, Vane said. Every keystroke, every packet of data. If someone hacked in, there's a trail. Elias was paranoid. He recorded the internet traffic coming into his house like it was security footage. The logs were wiped, I lied. They weren't wiped, but they were encrypted with a key we didn't have. Vane smirked. Elias used a dead man switch. If his heart stopped, his servers would automatically dump a backup to a secure cloud location. If you guys haven't found it yet, you're not looking hard enough. Vane's alibi checked out. He was in open court, on camera, without a phone or laptop. Unless he set a time-delayed logic bomb weeks ago, he was in the clear. But his tip about the dead man switch gave us a direction. We went back to the house. The tech team, led by a guy named Chen, was trying to brute force the encryption on the local servers. "We're getting nowhere," Chen admitted, rubbing his eyes. "This encryption is quantum resistant. It would take a supercomputer 100 years to crack it." "What about the cloud backup?" I asked. "Found a hidden partition," Chen said. "It pinged a server in Iceland right after his biomonitor flatlined. We're trying to subpoena the host, but what?" "But the data packet wasn't just sent out," Chen said, pointing to a graph on his screen. "Look at the traffic spike right before the murder, 11:41 a.m. I looked at the jagged red line. "Someone uploaded a massive file to the house?" "No," Chen said, his voice dropping. "Someone downloaded the security protocols. Someone from the inside." "Inside the network?" "No, detective, physically inside. Someone plugged a drive into the mainframe port." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Seattle rain. "The server room was locked. We had to break in." "There's a maintenance hatch," Miller said, walking into the room with a blueprint of the house. "Behind the rack servers. It leads to the crawl space under the house. It's tight, but a human could fit." We moved to the server room. The police tape was still up. The air still smelled faintly of the chemical scrubbers. We pushed the heavy server racks aside. Behind a tangle of fiber optic cables, there was a small panel, barely 2 feet square. The screws had been removed. I pulled my flashlight. "I'm going in." The crawl space was a nightmare of concrete and insulation. I army crawled through the dust, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. About 20 feet in, I found it. A discarded black hoodie and a Raspberry Pi, a tiny single-board computer hardwired into the junction box of the home's main Ethernet line. This wasn't a remote hack from Russia or China. This was a physical intrusion. The killer had been lying in wait in the crawl space, maybe for days, waiting for Thorne to enter the room. We bagged the evidence. The Raspberry Pi was our smoking gun. If we could analyze the data on the SD card, we'd have the source of the command. Back at the precinct, Agent Vance was looking smug. "Physical access," he said. "That changes the profile. We're looking for someone athletic, small build, knowledge of the house layout." "Who installed the system?" I asked. "A company called Aegis Home Defense," Miller replied, scrolling through her tablet. Lead installer was a guy named Marcus Corey, former Navy SEAL, discharged for conduct unbecoming. He knows the layout because he built it. We pulled Corey's file. He was working as a private security contractor. We put out an APB. 2 hours later, a patrol unit spotted his truck near the ferry terminal. We brought him in. Corey was a slab of muscle with eyes that didn't blink enough. He sat in the interrogation room with the stillness of a predator. "I didn't kill Thorne," Corey said, his voice a low rumble. "We found a tap on the line in the crawl space," I said. "You installed the system. You knew about the maintenance hatch. Who else would know?" "Thorne knew," Corey said, "and his head of security, and maybe his ex-wife." "Ex-wife?" I looked at Miller. "Thorne's file said he was single." "They were never legally married," Corey explained, "but they lived together for 5 years. Elena Rostova. She's a brilliant coder in her own right. She helped him write the kernel for the house AI. She knows the system better than I do. Why isn't she in the file?" I demanded. "Because Thorne erased her," Corey said. "When they split, he scrubbed her from his bio, his company history, everything. He tried to pretend she never existed. She hated him for it. She claimed he stole her code for the Citadel. This was the lead we needed. A motive, revenge, and theft. Access, knowledge of the system. Skill, she was a coder.
We tracked Alina Rostova to a loft in the Pioneer Square district. It was an old brick building converted into tech workspaces. It was raining harder now, night having fallen like a lead blanket. We didn't have enough for a warrant to kick the door, so we went for a knock and talk. I stood to the side of the door frame, Miller on the other. I knocked. Alina Rostova? Detective Silas, Seattle PD. No answer, but I heard the distinct sound of a hard drive spinning up, the whine of high-speed fans. "She's wiping data," Miller yelled. I kicked the door. It was reinforced, but the lockjam gave way on the second strike. We burst into the loft. The room was illuminated by the glow of 6 monitors. Sitting in the center was Alina Rostova. She wasn't running, she was typing furiously. "Step away from the keyboard," I shouted, weapon drawn. "Wait," she screamed, not looking at me. "I'm trying to stop it." Stop what? The worm. It's not just in Elias's house, it's in the update. I paused. What update? The Citadel firmware, she turned to me, her eyes wild with panic. Elias was pushing an update to all his clients tonight at midnight. The killer didn't just want Elias dead, he wanted to inject a backdoor into the update. If that goes out, whoever did this will have access to every bank, every hospital, every power grid that uses Thorn's software. She wasn't wiping evidence, she was trying to patch the vulnerability. "Agent Vance," I said into my radio, "get the feds to shut down the Citadel update server, now." "On it," came the reply. I lowered my gun. "Elena, who did this? If it wasn't you, who?" She pulled up a window on her screen. It was the code from the Raspberry Pi we found. I analyzed the signature. This coding style, it's archaic, efficient, but old school. It uses variables in a way I haven't seen since... She stopped. Her face went pale. "Since what?" "Since university," she whispered. "Elias and I had a professor, Dr. Eris Thorn." My blood ran cold. "The medical examiner?" "No," she said. "Eris isn't a medical doctor. He's a doctor of computer science. He's Elias's uncle. He taught us everything." I thought back to the crime scene, the medical examiner. I had introduced him as Dr. Eris Thorn in my head, assuming the relation was a coincidence or distant. But the ME at the scene? I grabbed my phone and dialed the precinct. "Get me the personnel file on the medical examiner who responded to the Thorn scene, now." "Detective," the desk sergeant said, "the ME on rotation today is Dr. Phillips. He's at a scene in West Seattle." "Then who was the guy at the Thorn house?" "We didn't dispatch an ME yet, Detective. The call came in that the body was being transported to the morgue by a private ambulance service contracted by the estate." I dropped the phone. The man in the glasses, the man who declared the time of death, the man who stood in the room with us while we discussed the evidence. "He was there," I said to Miller. "The killer was in the room with us." "Eris Thorn," Elena said, typing rapidly. "He was the original creator of the Citadel concept. Elias stole it from him 20 years ago. Eris went to prison for cyberstalking and industrial espionage. He was released 2 weeks ago." We had been played. Eris had killed his nephew, then posed as the ME to ensure the accidental nature of the death was recorded, or to recover something from the scene. The drive, I realized, the Raspberry Pi. We found it, but he was there when we found it. "No," Miller said. "He left before we found the hatch, but he heard us talking about the logs." "Where is he now?" I asked Elena. "If he wants to push that update," Elena said, "he can't do it from a laptop. He needs the master key, which is on the mainframe inside the house." "He's going back to the scene," I said. We ran back to the car. The drive back to Skyline Drive was a blur of sirens and hydroplaning tires. I called for backup, but we were 20 minutes out, and the update was scheduled for midnight. It was 11:45 p.m.
When we crested the hill, I saw the lights of the Thorn mansion blazing. The gate was closed this time. I rammed it with the Crown Vic, metal screeching against metal as the heavy iron buckled. We skidded to a halt on the wet pavement. I drew my weapon. Miller flanked the left. "Police! Eris Thorne, come out!" The front door was locked. I shot out the glass pane and reached through, unlocking it. We moved in. The house was alive. The lights were strobing in a disorienting pattern. Music, classical opera, was blasting at deafening volume from the hidden speakers. It was psychological warfare. "He's in the basement," Miller yelled over the music. We breached the stairwell door. The temperature had dropped again. It was freezing. At the bottom of the stairs, the glass wall of the server room was intact. Inside, standing over the dead body of his nephew, which was still there because the private ambulance never came, was the man I had met earlier, Eris Thorne. He was typing on the main terminal. The screen showed a progress bar, update uploading 85%. Step away from the console. I aimed my Glock at his head through the glass. Eris looked up. He smiled, a cold, thin expression. He tapped a key. Clunk. The heavy steel door behind us, the one leading back up the stairs, slammed shut. The magnetic locks engaged. "I expected you sooner, Detective." Aris's voice came over the intercom system. "But I suppose you had to talk to Elena first. She was always the bright one." "Open the door, Eris," I shouted. "It's over. The FBI is shutting down the servers." "They can try," Aris replied calmly. "But this is a direct injection. Once it hits 100%, the Citadel belongs to me. I will own the digital footprint of half of America." "You killed your own family?" Miller spat. "He stole my life," Aris snapped, his composure cracking for a second. "He took my code, my fortune, and left me to rot in a cell. I'm just taking back my property." He turned back to the screen. 90%. "Shoot the glass," Miller yelled. I fired. Bang! Bang! The bullet sparked off the polycarbonate. It was bulletproof. Of course it was. "Atmospheric displacement active," the automated voice of the house announced. I looked up. The vents in the ceiling of our room, the observation room outside the glass cage, hissed. "He's dumping the gas on us," I realized. "You have about 2 minutes, Detective," Aris said, not looking back. "Argon is heavy. It will displace the oxygen from the floor up. I suggest you don't lie down." I felt the panic rising. The air suddenly felt thinner. My heart rate spiked. "Think, Silas," I told myself. "Think." I looked at the smart home control panel on the wall next to the glass. It was locked out. "Miller, the panel." "I can't hack it fast enough," she screamed, coughing. I looked at the glass. Bulletproof, but was it soundproof? No, nothing is perfectly soundproof if the frequency is right. And the house had a massive sound system. Elena, I thought. I grabbed my phone. 1 bar of service. I dialed. "Elena, we're trapped. He's gassing us. I need you to crash the system." "I can't get in remotely," she cried. "He's firewalled everything." "Use the speakers," I yelled, my head starting to spin. "The house has a sonic resonance system for the home theater. Can you access the audio subsystem? It's usually on a separate, less secure network for streaming." "Audio, yes, I see the Spotify Connect bridge. It's open." "Overload it," I wheezed. I dropped to one knee, then forced myself back up. The gas was rising. "Play a frequency, resonant frequency of polycarbonate, 2800 hertz, max volume." "Cover your ears," Elena shouted through the phone. I grabbed Miller and pulled her to the floor, covering her head with my jacket, clamping my hands over my ears. "Now!" A screeching, high-pitched wail erupted from the hidden subwoofers and tweeters embedded in the walls. It was a sound so intense it felt like a physical blow. My teeth vibrated in my skull. The world blurred. Inside the glass cage, Aris flinched, covering his ears. He looked around in confusion. The glass wall began to vibrate. It hummed, then wobbled, the physics of sound meeting a rigid structure. The volume increased. It was agonizing. Crack! A spiderweb fracture appeared in the center of the ballistic glass. Shatter!
With a sound like a thunderclap, the entire wall exploded inward, showering Eris and the dead body of Elias in millions of shards of safety glass. The air pressure equalized instantly. The argon gas vented into the larger room, diluting it. Oxygen rushed back in. I scrambled up, coughing, lungs burning. I vaulted over the jagged remains of the window. Eris was on the ground, bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts, reaching for a gun he had tucked in his waistband. I kicked it out of his hand and pinned him to the floor, my knee in his back. "Don't move," I screamed, the adrenaline flooding my system. Miller stumbled in behind me, gun trained on Eris. I looked at the screen. Update, upload, 98%, error, connection lost. The system had crashed when the hardware was destroyed by the glass explosion. I pulled Eris's hands behind his back and cuffed him. "Eris Thorne, you are under arrest for the murder of Elias Thorne and the attempted murder of 2 police officers." He spat blood on the floor. "It doesn't matter," he wheezed. The code is eternal." "Yeah, well, you're not," I said, hauling him up. We dragged him out of the house just as the FBI tactical team swarmed the driveway. Agent Vance looked at the shattered glass, the bleeding suspect, and the 2 breathless detectives. "Looks like you handled it," Vance said, a hint of respect in his voice. "Jurisdiction," I coughed, wiping blood from my cheek. "It's a beautiful thing." The aftermath was messy. Eris Thorne is currently awaiting trial in a federal supermax with no access to computers. Elena Rostova inherited the estate and the company. She destroyed the Citadel code and released a patch to secure the systems. She said the world wasn't ready for a house that could think for itself. I sat in my car that night, watching the rain wash away the blood on the driveway. I looked at my phone, a smart device, a GPS tracker, a microphone, a camera. We invite these things into our lives for convenience. We trade our privacy for comfort. But in the silence of that house, I learned a terrifying truth. When you connect everything, you are safe from nothing. The walls have ears, and sometimes they have hands. I drove home in silence. When I walked into my apartment, I did the only thing that made sense. I unplugged Alexa. I put tape over my laptop camera, and I locked my door with a deadbolt, a real, physical, metal deadbolt. Technology moves fast, but murder? Murder is the oldest habit of mankind. And as long as there are people who want to kill, they will turn any tool into a weapon, even the air you breathe. So, here is the question that keeps me up at night, and I want you to answer it in the comments below. If your house could think, what secrets would it know about you? And more importantly, would it like what it sees? Hit that like button if this story gave you the chills, and don't forget to subscribe for the next case file.